And now for the obligatory superhero movie of January of Suck. This time, Supergirl the movie, the 1984 spinoff to the Christopher Reeve Superman movie that no one seems to remember, yet kind of do remember. I don't know, it's tough to say, because this is one of those movies that I'm well aware of its existence, and it's often, considered as one of the worst superhero movies ever made. But at the same time, when things like lists pop up like that, not that this isn't a common one to be seen, but it's one of the ones that isn't brought up right away. Like, normally people say, like, Fan Four Stick, Batman and Robin, X-Men Origins Wolverine. This one, like I said, it's there, but it's not as often. And having watched the movie, I'd assume it's maybe because, the movie is certainly bad, but I gotta be honest, it's not without charm. Like, it's still not good, but the movie finds some entertainment through what's the actress's name? Helen Slater, the actress who plays Supergirl in the movie, who has gone on to be a DC regular from what I've noticed. I know she actually did return for like the Supergirl show that's on I guess it's NBC now, as the adopted mother, I believe it is her role. I gotta be honest, I don't really watch any of the DC shows, not because I don't think they're good or anything. It's just I never really have the time, so I've never gone on to watch many of them. I've watched at most a few episodes. Did watch that Supergirl and Flash crossover the first time they did it, so that's something. But onto this movie, I'm like, she's fine. Like, I remember seeing people trashing her performance, and I'm like, honestly, I think it's fine. I don't think it's any bad in this. But what's the movie about? So, Supergirl comes from the city of Kandor, or I believe it's still the city of Kandor in this version. Honestly, I noticed some stuff is kind of different from, what's known from the comics, but pretty much it's like a floating city of Kryptonians who, survived the planet getting blown up, because I don't know if they're already on space or not. I don't know how this movie interpreted it. To be quite honest, if there's one problem I have with the movie, it's that a lot of it I kind of got lost on, because I wasn't sure whether or not they were fully explaining it, or it's just that the movie was that dull, boring, that I couldn't remember a whole lot of it. So, gotta take a lot of points off of that. But, so she comes from there. An important piece of tech, keeping the city being powered, is taken from it. So that's why she leaves to go off and, retrieve it. And it ends up on Earth. Along the way, she becomes Supergirl. I don't understand how she gets the suit and everything, but whatever, we'll buy it. So she goes there. She has a secret identity. She openly states that she's the cousin of Superman, despite being, undercover. And that's also another weird point in the movie, is that she constantly mentions that. And Superman isn't anywhere around. Like, they explain why he's not around, but it's like, without him around, it really does feel cheap. And not that it would have made the movie better to have him around, but it would have at least cleared up some confusion in it, because it really does feel like, oh yeah, I'm related to this guy. No mention of him at all, so that's, there is mention, but no appearance of him, so it's kind of like, why even bother having that detail? But anyways, so she's looking for it, and it turns out that this witch, played by Faye Dunaway, gets it. So she's the Faye Dunaway character. I should like her story a little more, considering that, aside from like the obvious world domination or ruling the world, whatever, takeover kind of thing that she's trying to pull off, she's also trying to find, this guy to truly love her, simple shit, which I'm like, I kind of love it when villains have, like, simple goals that, is selfish, petty, or whatever, but, it's just a drive for them. but again, it's just a lame villain. Granted, I can't really shit on her performance too much because at least she's committed to it, which is not something I could say about a lot of other shitty villains that I've seen in superhero movies. But not a good one. And so Supergirl has to go, get that piece back from her because she's using it because Faye Dunaway is using that piece from her city to power her spells or whatever, and Supergirl saves the day. Superhero stuff. Again, the movie is just kind of all over the place. Stuff gets brought up, but there's really no payoff or reason for it. It can make it confusing. The movie, drags a lot, so it becomes boring. So a lot of stuff you can easily forget. And yeah, it's just the story is so damn all over the place. Because, like from stuff that I've seen complaints on the movie, I'm like, a lot of it isn't as bad as people say. Like, the effects, I'm like, yeah, it's not good, in terms of today's standards. And sure, maybe it wasn't, as great, in the standards of back then either. But there's still a charm to it, and it's not awful. Like, that's the main thing that I kept on reading, is like, it's awful effects, and I'm like, not really. Like, it's still, works for what it is. Like, of course, when you see her flying, it's clear that, she's on wires, or that it's, a screen that she's going by. But, again, it was one of those things where it's like, the technology of the time, was where it was at. And again, not saying that, it was, the peak of its time period, but it's certainly not as bad as people would say it is. The acting, for the most part, was fine from all the characters, even if I didn't really care for certain characters. Like I said, with Faye Dunaway, I didn't like her villain character, but her performance was fine for it. It just, the character sucked. And of course, Supergirl was charming and herself. Like, if she was given a better movie, I would see, Helen Slater as, regarded as one of the more iconic, super heroines that you'd see on film. And yeah, well, it's certainly something. The music, nothing incredibly fascinating, but at the same time, there is kind of a beat to it. It's kind of nice, and yeah, throughout this entire movie, I'm just like, it's at its worst, mainly in that it's, kind of a confusing, boring mess that drags, as, a technical thing, as a thing from the actors and whatnot. They're trying, so I can't really say it's, one of the worst superhero movies. Like, it's definitely not a good one, but if I were to do, like, a top 10 worst superhero movies, I would not really consider this one. Like, maybe if it was top 20, but then again, I'd have to look at how many superheroes movies there have been. But, like, if you were to whittle it down to the top 10, definitely not. Top 20, maybe. Top 30, that's when it becomes a guaranteed for me of where this would land as a worst superhero movie. But at top 30, you're kind of really pushing it. So, yeah, it's not as bad as people say it is. It's still a mess, and it still drags, and it's still confusing and boring. But, for what it is, it's certainly a little more charming than it gets credit for. And I could see why it's often forgotten as a bad movie, at least in terms of, not being one of the first ones that people name when you think of bad movies, even though it's often put in, like, worst lists for it. But, hey, whatever, As I always say, oh well.